randomly one day someone was like, "Hey, did you know you could build a home-based business and you could literally supplement your income? And if you wanted to, you could get to a point where you could replace your income." And once I learned that, it completely transformed my life.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to Be On Air. I'm your host, Kaylee Marks. If you're an entrepreneur, coach, author, or have a brand and are trying to grow your business, or even if you just have a message to share, then this show is for you. We are sharing proven blueprints to amplify yourself, and we'll discuss every step of the podcaster's journey to give you the mindset, tools, and community that you need to launch and grow your own impactful podcasting platform so that you can be on air. Before we get into today's episode, if you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing this podcast with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps so much. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Be On Air. I'm your host, Kaylee Marks. I'm here today with host of the Home-Based Business Podcast, Ryan Allen Bell, and I'm really excited about our conversation today. He coaches people on how to build a thriving home business, and he has a wonderful podcast as well, which I encourage everyone to go check out. And he had some extreme success in the early phase of his podcast, so hopefully we'll be able to get into that a little bit today. So Ryan, how are you doing today?
What's up, man? I'm amazing. Blessed to be on here. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. It's great to get to connect with you. These crazy times we live in, we're having conversations with people all over the world from the comfort of our own home. We're able to make millions from the comfort of our own home. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your history with your business, kind of like how you started working from home, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So what's unique is I was prepared for our current economy 8 years ago. Like I've been literally have preparing for it, not realizing that we were going to go into a online world, right? So I started a home-based business over 8 years ago because that was my dream. It was my dream to start a home-based business. Now, fast forward 8 years, now it's a reality for each and every one of us. So I was like uniquely preparing for this moment for the last 8 years. But yeah, just to give you a little bit about my background, like I could literally go all the way back to I was like 7 or 8 years old when like we first got the internet. And I remember seeing an ad on Google that said, "Hey, learn how to become an entrepreneur." And it was a young guy like us in front of this convertible on this ad on the computer. And I was like, you know what? That looks like something I would want to do with my life. But here's the thing, as I got older and I started going to school and like hanging out with my friends and my family, I didn't connect with any entrepreneurs. So I didn't know how to become an entrepreneur. And so I got stuck in like this regular traditional career route, and I decided to pursue a career in firefighting. My grandpa was a firefighter. So I was like, hey, that could be a good career for me. I could stay in shape and, earn an income, provide for my family. So I pursued that. So in college, I got my fire academy. I went through a fire academy, 3-month process. I went through and got my associates in fire technology. And I worked as an EMT for 6 years working the 911 system. Wow. So I was in it. I was in this thing. But here's the thing. About 6 years into this, I realized that I couldn't see myself doing that for the next 20 years of my life. I just wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy with this. And I just wasn't passionate about it. And so I actually went through a period about a year or two where I was just depressed. I just didn't know what to do. And I felt lost in life. I couldn't even see like weeks ahead of me. I knew I didn't want to be in this career. And then randomly one day, someone was like, "Hey, did you know you could build a home-based business and you could literally supplement your income? And if you wanted to, you could get to a point where you could replace your income." And once I learned that, it completely transformed my life. I started hanging out with people who had the results that I wanted. And I started learning from them and taking action from them, reading the books that they read. And eventually over time, I started getting the results that they had. And so it took about 2 years of me working part-time on my home-based business before I started earning more income than working full-time at my job. And so I quit my job. That was over 5 years ago. And so for the last 5 years, I've been completely full-time working from home, hanging out with my family. It's a blessing. And what's interesting is I started building my business using social media back in the day, like Instagram, Facebook, and whatnot. But I just didn't realize how big those platforms were going to get. And today they are here and they're thriving, and bigger platforms are coming on. And yeah, so that's my story, man. And that led into me starting my podcast, a home-based business podcast, because I built a home-based business, a successful home-based business. We've done business in over 10 countries, from the comfort of my home, which is pretty amazing. And I've been coaching people on how to build their own home-based businesses. And so I got inspired pretty much when COVID started earlier this year. I was like, hey, you know what? If I could only build my business online, how am I going to build it? And I was like, okay, the first thing I got to do is start a podcast. I was like, I might as well just talk about what I'm already an expert at, And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, the rest is history, man.
Wow, that's such a cool story and journey of you discovering your purpose and trying different things and kind of identifying the target that you wanted to achieve, the goal, and then working towards it. It sounds like you had to work like 2 years part-time to be able to transition, but it must have felt amazing when you finally did reach that income mark that you were trying to reach. And would you tell us a little bit about what you do with your clients, or like how do you help people start their home-based business?
Yeah. So think about how any business around the world works. They either promote some type of product or service, right? And that's how the whole entire economy works. Sales is such a noble career. That's how the whole world has been operating for centuries, is sales, right? And so I'm in health and wellness. And what we do is we teach people how to sell health products online. And that's all I do is I coach people who are passionate about health or want to learn about promoting health. It has the top percentile for products in the marketplace because everyone wants to be healthy. No one wants to be unhealthy. And so I teach people how to promote and sell health products online using social media. And most of that isn't in coaching. And believe it or not, it's not necessarily like the skills and the strategies and whatnot, but it really comes down to mindset. Is like, you need to start thinking like an entrepreneur in order to be an entrepreneur. If you've been brought up your whole life thinking like an employee, like you need to change your mindset if you want to have success as an entrepreneur, So that's what I do now is I coach people.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Association is everything. So you're coaching people, helping them set up their business. I love that distinction. Products or services, that's the only things that we can really sell. And, even before going into podcasting, that is so important for us to know, like, why are we building a podcast? How is that going to support our business? And to think of it as like a separate thing, unless it's a hobby podcast. If it's a podcast that with the goal of supporting or being plugged into your business, then we have to consider the underlying structure of the business and what's going on. How is it going to make revenue? So I'm kind of curious, like your journey a little bit with your launching your show, and how did you sort of plug it into your business so that it would support it?
Yeah. So to start, the reason why I started a podcast is because I realized that that's where the world's attention is right now. And so if I was giving you an example, if I was to say, hey, go promote your brand on MySpace, you're not going to do it and you're not going to have results on it because there's no attention on MySpace. That's old school, right? But what's happening now is more and more people are listening to podcasts. So podcasting is trending right now. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so the reason why I've incorporated it into my brand is because now I could get more and more people listening to my message. I could be able to teach them through podcasting. And nowadays, with the world so busy, anyone can listen to a podcast. You're probably listening to this right now in your car, working out, at home, doing dishes, doing laundry, whatever it is, on a run, and so you just fit it into your life. And so that's the way I've done it is I'm just utilizing the technology that's out there. And a big thing that comes to mind right now is pivoting. You want to pivot with the way economy is going, right? So if I was to give you an example, if Elon Musk was going to build Tesla, but to build it with gasoline, he's never going to pass Ford. But he pivoted with technology. He's like, you know what? I'm going to create an electric car. And boom, now Tesla's worth more than Ford. Mm-hmm. And so that's exactly why we want a podcast, is we're pivoting with the times. Technology is here. This is the online world. This is the best opportunity possible to get your brand, your business, your message out to the marketplace. Is podcasting for sure.
Absolutely. And if it wasn't like that before COVID, it is now for sure extra, right? And so,
Yep.
you talked a little bit about mindset and how important that is when building your business at home. Could you talk a little bit about maybe like your experience starting your show, and did you come up against any blocks or obstacles that you were able to work through via your mindset?
So when I first started podcasting or pursuing a podcast, it wasn't a walk in the park for sure. And here's the reason is because it's newer technology, is something that I didn't have experience with. And so it took me about 2 years to actually launch my podcast, believe it or not. And the reason behind it is because I was doing all my due diligence trying to figure out how to podcast. What equipment do I need? Where, like, how do I record? All that good stuff, how to upload it on all the platforms. And I got to a point where I pretty much hit a wall and I was like, you know what? I need to learn from someone who has results in podcasting already. And so I ended up hiring a coach. And I promise you, it was the best decision I've ever made when it comes to podcasting. Hired a coach, and here's the thing about mentors. Like, if you're maybe fearful about investing into yourself financially, just know that that is a key. That is an indicator that you do need to invest into yourself financially, because invest into a mentor, it's a time capsule. You know, you'll be a year or two ahead time wise, but you're not actually going to lose that 1 to 2 years,
Mhm.
because you're gaining all their knowledge and experience like that, like in a second, and then boom, you can incorporate it. So once I hired a mentor, everything changed.
That's such a great tip right there. Yeah. So I've run into this with a lot of my clients where the analysis paralysis of what gear, what hosting, what name, do I pay for artwork, like all that stuff.
Yep.
And none of it addresses my content, or how is this podcast, how am I strategically thinking about the podcast and how it's going to support my main content pillars and all this stuff. And so I think having a coach that's just like, hey, we're going to just move through all that stuff and let's get your content out now. Like, yes, set it up as good as possible, make it sound as good as we could possibly make it. But really, I've found that getting started is probably half the battle, and that the improvement can happen over time, especially as we're listening to feedback from our communities and from our audience. So that's an awesome tip that you just shared there. So once you actually hired that coach, what was your experience like launching your show? Is there any tips you could share for podcasters listening in on some best practices for like one or two things that they could consider when launching their show?
Of course, man. So after I hired my coach, the main thing that happened to me is I had complete clarity and certainty in what I was doing. And all I had to do was take action and release my podcast, right? Now, here's some tips, because I talk to a lot of podcasters, and the biggest challenge that I see is they want to learn how to grow their audience. They have challenges on reaching more people. And so for me, this is hands down the biggest tip I could ever give. And this isn't only for podcasting. You can use this tip for anywhere in your life. You can use this tip for the rest of your life. It comes down to building your network. So for the last 8 years, I've been building my network. I've been connecting with people, building relationships, and I've been doing this for 8 years in a row. And so by the time I started this podcast, what I did is I just reached out to my network. I was like, hey, I'm about to launch the Home-Based Business podcast. Are you open to support me? And most people were like, yeah, for sure. Send me the link. And because of that, we charted in the first day on the charts. And it was absolutely incredible. We got top 100 in the US for education and self-improvement. And the only reason that was possible is because I built my network for the last 8 years. I didn't do any fancy marketing. I didn't do any fancy whatever. All I did was build my network consistently for 8 years. And so that is literally a hack to success. Is start today. Just start cultivating better relationships in your life. Just pay more attention to people, figure out what they need, figure out what they want, figure out what are their pain points, figure out where they want to go in life, and then just serve them as you live their life,
Such great advice, such great experience that you had, and it shows the power of connection and of humans helping each other. And social networks, with their algorithms, with the feed, it's so hard to cut through that and actually communicate with people. So it sounds like you bypass that altogether in a sense,
Yep.
and you built that network. Maybe you had their emails, maybe you had their phone numbers, maybe they were your friends on Messenger, and you directly reached out to them. And I think that's really powerful. And I've heard a lot of podcasters start charting because of a similar strategy of reaching out. So that's super helpful. Thanks for sharing that. So in your recording and in your process, like, what are you using? Let's get a little technical real quick, because this show is for podcasters. So I'm kind of curious, what's your setup?
So I have a unique setup. And this is actually a reason why it took me so long to actually start podcasting. So I use an iPad. That's what I use. I use an iPad. Most people have a normal laptop or a desktop, right? But for me, I had an iPad, and that is not normal. It's very unique. And so I was like, how am I going to start a podcast on an iPad? And so I actually found random courses out there on how to podcast on an iPad. I found different softwares, right? So you have GarageBand. I like to use Ferrite. On mine, it's Ferrite to record my audio, my interviews, and my episodes. And when I hired my coach, I just told him my setup. I was like, hey, I have an iPad. It has GarageBand. It has Ferrite. I like Ferrite better. It was like, if you could figure it out, go for it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to mess with it until I get it. I got it down, And so that's what I use. iPad with Ferrite.
Listen to that, folks. You do not need to throw down $1,000 on all the best gear and computers and microphones and lights. You can do it on an iPad. I think that's so important. Keep going. That's such a good point.
100%, man. And so in my 2-year journey on learning how to podcast, I found a training by John Lee Dumas. He's an icon inside of podcasting. It was a free training. He was like, hey, all you need to buy is an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 mic. It's only like $70. I got it on Amazon, and that's what I use. That's the mic I'm on right now, and it sounds great. And I just use that. I have a little boom arm connected to my desk. And then really all I needed is a USB adapter that goes into my iPad. You could get that on Amazon too, or go to Apple and buy a USB adapter. And so that's my setup. It's the boom arm to the mic. Oh, also I have headphones. What are these? I think these are, I'm not quite sure what my headphones are, but they're pretty affordable. Like for sure less than $100. Just Google like what headphones podcasters use. And I think I YouTubed it. I watched a couple YouTube videos on headphones, and I just picked out like the most popular one that was under $100, because you could go all out. You could buy like 300, 400 headphones, but it's not really necessary.
You could even use earbuds, which is what I'm using right now to hear you. And whatever you got, you can kind of make work until you get something nicer, more comfortable. That's so cool. So how do you fit podcasting now? You have this good setup, you have that going, and you had a killer strategy, you had a coach. You're putting out episodes that relate to your network. How do you fit podcasting into your business, into your schedule, into your flow? Like, what place does it hold?
Yeah. You know what? When I first started this, before I hired my coach, I thought it was going to be very, very time consuming and very challenging. But once I learned what I needed to learn, I found out that it was not. And here's the reason why. So I have an editor. I hired an editor to do all of my editing for every one of my podcasts. And so now what I do is I just record my solo episodes and my interviews, and I'll take the audio and I'll put it in a Dropbox folder that I share with my editor, and he handles all of that. And then what he does on the back end is he uploads it to our hosting platform, and which goes out to all of the platforms out there. And so literally I like to batch, right? Batching is when you just record a lot of episodes in a small, significant amount of time. And so I batch, and I'll batch for like, a day or two, and I'll have content for a whole month.
Nice. And
so it's very, very simple. I'm never stressed out about content because of my setup. I think outsourcing the editor, it saves me hours, so financially, if you are prepared to invest into an editor, I would say for sure do it. I would even say, like, if you plan on building a podcast as a business, I think it's a necessity, because your time is worth way more than you're paying for the editor.
Yeah, I love talking about this point too. And
Yeah.
I'm just pulling out my calculator here. I just wanted to run this calculation by you because I think this is interesting. I'm not sure what you're paying or what the average rate is, but let's pretend for a second that you put around $100, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on who you find, into each episode, and you do 4 a month, right? So that's
Yeah.
$400 a month of editing. Let's just make that $500, and then let's multiply that by 12. So that's a $6,000 investment. And I think that's important to just get okay with and to understand that that's an investment in your business. And you can record all those episodes within a couple months, and then you could be done for the whole year if you wanted.
Yeah, serious.
Right. So it's interesting looking at it as an investment. So have you felt really good about that investment in your business through the form of podcasting? Because I think some people are on the fence. They're like, podcasting, I want to, is it going to make me money through sponsors? Like, how is this going to pay for itself? So how have you seen it be, how have you seen that return on investment show up in your business?
So I am 100% positive this is going to be one of the best branding decisions I've ever made in my life, because what a podcast does is it builds brand equity. It just makes you more credible, and people are going to trust, like, and respect you even more. And so the way I fit it into my business is I'm using it to communicate with my audience. And so I'll get people that DM me on Instagram that's like, oh my God, I've been listening to your podcast. By the way, what do you do? Boom. That's a lead right there for me. I'm going to plug them in to my free Facebook community, learn what they have to do, learn what they want out of life. And then if they're a fit to work for each other, I'm like, hey, this is what I do. And so that's how I'm generating leads, is by using my podcast. And so think about it. If I'm paying, or if you're paying $6,000 a year for an editor, right? But let's say you have to do the math with the clients. For me, I'm going to break even with 3 clients straight up. And so it's so worth the investment. Like I don't even know how much income I'll earn from it, but it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. What you said right there, right? There's, I think that we're seeing in today's marketplace, there's a room for pocket products or smaller course bundles, right? But a lot of individual entrepreneurs are going for more like high ticket courses or high ticket coaching packages. And so it's really a tiny investment when you think about it in the long term. Like you said, within a few clients, you can make that investment back. And the even more important part that you mentioned is your time, your hourly, the amount of time going into editing and the stress and being out of flow state and not working on your actual business or creating more content. That costs. It's actually costing us. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned online community, and this is a secret tip I've been hearing from a ton of podcasters. Could you talk a little bit about how you're using your Facebook community and what that interaction is like as far as getting them into your business as well?
The community is one of my favorite things about what I do. So I have the Home-Based Business podcast where I give all of my experience over the years, and then I interview thought leaders who are building successful home-based businesses. And then what I tell my audience is like, hey, if you want to connect with like-minded people, join my free Facebook community. Just go to my website, ryanallenbell.com/community, and they'll join my Facebook community. And inside the community, what it is, you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people that are building successful home-based businesses and people who want to learn how to build successful home-based businesses. And so it's a giant mastermind. That's really what it's coming into. We have over 100 people in it right now. And think if you're building a podcast and you want to learn how to monetize your podcast, learn from people who are monetizing their podcasts, and boom, that's a community to plug into, And so it's just like, there's so many different ways that I could go in there and help people reach their goals. And I think the thing that people love about the most, bro, is there's networking, and that's how like I said earlier, is I networked for the last 8 years, and so you go in there, build your network, build good relationships. And you don't necessarily have to do business with these people like day one. It might take a year or 2 or 3 until you guys line up and want to do business together, but at least start building the relationships, And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just building those relationships in there and helping as many people as I can.
Yeah, I love that about your mindset and just the importance of community, the power of network. That's great tips. So now, kind of like zooming out, if you're looking on this whole process, if you could go back in time and give yourself 1 or 2 pieces of advice or tips or anything, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself, hire a coach way sooner. Like, do it immediately. That's what I would have done day one. I would have hired a coach before I spent 2 years trying to learn how to do it myself. I would have hired a coach. And honestly, I think that's the biggest piece of advice. The thing for me is I waited too long thinking of how to do it because I didn't know how to do it. So what I should have done immediately is just hire someone that knows how to do it. And that investment in itself also financially was way worth it. So I would say that's the number one piece of advice. I can't really think of anything else. I think that in itself would have saved so much time for me.
And that's huge. That's huge because time is money, and time is more important than money. It's our life, it's our time with our loved ones. So if we can save that time, get the clarity, and have a path forward, then we're already in a better position than many people to launch our business and be aligned with our purpose. So that's so cool. Would you talk to us a little bit about how people could get in touch with you? Obviously, I'll link to your community in the show notes and all that. But how, if people are interested in learning about creating their own home-based business and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
I would say the best way is you could listen to my podcast, the Home-Based Business Podcast, right? And secondly is you could get involved inside of my community. That's where you could work more one-on-one with me. So you could just go to Ryan Allen Bell, that's ALLEN. So ryanallenbell.com/community. And then we could have a conversation there for sure.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, and I've had just a couple of conversations with you, but you're so helpful and genuine, and I can tell you're trying to help everyone in this hard time get that life that they're dreaming of. Stop having to either submit for unemployment or go to a job that is stressing them out, and to connect with their purpose and passions and give that to the world in a way that's going to also support them and their family. So I highly recommend everyone go check out the Home-Based Business Podcast and check out your community as well. And thank you so much, Ryan, for giving your time on the show. You've been an awesome guest, and you've given us some serious wisdom. I'm excited to share this with my audience, and I know it's going to help them.
You're the man, bro. Thanks for putting this together. I know you're really impacting people. We're in an abundant time, and that's what you're doing. You're creating abundance for people out in the marketplace, man. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be in touch.
Cool.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Be On Air. I hope you enjoyed it and are now one step closer to turning on your mic and broadcasting your message to the world. Are you ready to start your own podcast and amplify your brand? Or are you struggling to get your show in front of engaged audiences? I can help you on your broadcasting journey. Get in touch with me and apply for a strategy session if you want to discuss your podcast idea. You can reach me at www.podcast-farm.com. I'm on all the social media. Until next time, my friends, I'm Kaylee Marks. Thanks for tuning in to Be On Air.